Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up this week with a creator request, which is where a smaller band gets in contact with me and asks me to check out their work. Today, we're going to be looking at a song called Launch of the Sagittarius from the group Rogue Frequency. Now, they only have 15 subscribers on YouTube, and as I've mentioned before, YouTube might not be the best place to look. Spotify usually has more followers and listens or whatever, but I think it still stands. This might be one of the smallest bands we've had on the channel, and I'm really excited to get into listening what they have for us. So let's check out what Rogue Frequency is bringing to the table.
Countdown begins so slowly. You strap to the seat, the future looks bleak. You bathe in rouge. Your helmet hides your motions from one's view.
Oh, interesting. Just letting that hang there.
Fear.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it sounds like we're in the same idea, just a variation on the drum work. Interesting, 2 times we've kind of built up to something and not taking it anywhere. I'm curious if they're staving that off for a big moment. I'm really digging that groove, and I like the harmony in the vocal work. Got a nice little proggy rock tone here. I like the bass and the violin there, harmonizing with each other on the same line. It's interesting the snare specifically feels behind me. It's an interesting place to put it. Alright, got a little bit more gusto here. Great dynamic work. Opening up that guitar tone, having the bass continue to have this run underneath. Ooh, okay. Interesting panning. bringing it back to the chorus. Interesting way to do that.
Tears catch the sunlight and float away from you. You flip back the switch for that final burn. You leave the earth. Isolation's tendrils wrap you in.
Yes. Oh man. I do kind of wish that had went on just a hair bit longer. Um Such a good guitar solo, really strong melody writing. It didn't really feel block or loop based at all. Just kind of kept going when it needed to pause and breathe. It did when it needed to, keep going. It did. The only thing I really think really had a negative aspect about it was that it ended too soon, or maybe subsequently it didn't feel like it ended when the song ended. Maybe it just could have been wrapped up a little tighter there, or maybe the song should have been expanded, another 4 bars or something to allow it to kind of finish up the way that it should. However, for all I know, it continues into the next idea on the album. So, yeah, it's a very abrupt, I think, is my criticism there, and maybe it's warranted. But at least in isolation, looking at just this one song, it does feel a bit, um, yeah, just abrupt. It ends too soon. So, what do we got here? What do we got here? It's really interesting because this is sort of like a proggy jam band kind of vibe, but structurally, I get a different vibe to it, and I don't quite know what it is yet. There's something familiar about it. I don't know where to place that. There is something wholly unique to it, at least to my ears. But again, I don't quite know where to place it. It's this foundational aspect that I really have a term for, and proggy jam stuff. Um, Sort of that chill psychedelic kind of jam bands, right? Everyone's kind of laid back and everyone just has a real nice role to fill and they play it. But there's other elements to it that I don't know that I would feel comfortable saying, this is 70s prog, right? Some modern retro stuff. Um, a modern take on a classic genre. But it has other influences there, and I'm not quite sure what they are, but it's really neat hearing it sort of bend and mold to these other styles. Before we get into some of that, though, one thing I want to touch on is the production. First of all, it's in this interesting place where I simultaneously feel like it's too quiet and too loud. I felt like I couldn't find the right volume dial to really get that perfect moment. And maybe I think a little bit of that has to do with the prominence of the vocals. I don't think the vocals are produced poorly, but I do think they're a little too loud. Like, so don't touch anything else, don't touch compression or anything, but I would just bring it down just a hair, so that when I turn the volume up, the rest of the instruments feel like I can get them to a good volume, and it doesn't feel overpowered by the vocals. Um, but there's a lot of really clear production in here, and I am a huge fan of that. Our drums are center channel behind me, which is really interesting. I don't know if I enjoy that yet or not. It wasn't anything that rubbed me the wrong way or anything. It didn't annoy me. It was just very different. All right. We had our guitar pan right, bass pan left. Vocals were kind of all over the place. Sometimes they were center, sometimes they were to the side, and I enjoy that sort of variety that we got out of that. We also had a few guitar tones that were utilized through here. The bass is pretty static, the drums were pretty static, and then we had a couple of vocal styles. Um, where we had something that was pretty clean, and then we had something that was a bit raw. We had some extra compression and distortion put on it. So we had a couple of vocal tones as well from the production. And I really enjoyed, though, the side to side thing we got going on here. So I'd mentioned the guitar is to our right, the bass is to our left. That never changes. It's balanced for a majority of the track, but we get to any section where the guitar takes the melody over from the vocals, such as that extended bridge or our outro solo, and it makes it feel a bit weighted. The guitar has the spotlight, but instead of putting the spotlight in the middle of the listener's attention, it's off to the side and it feels a little lopsided. But again, I don't think it detracted from my listening experience as much as it normally would. I've called this out into question a few times, and I'd say the majority of the times that I bring it up, it's usually a negative for me. That the focus typically in my mind should be centered. But here I don't know if it was a volume thing. Maybe it's because you didn't boost the volume up on the guitars to put them in the spotlight, and it was more of a passing of the baton. They were in the spotlight because our vocals were missing, kind of vibe. Or maybe it had to do with the fact that our vocals had been non-centered at times before. I don't know. It was attention grabbing. That's for sure. When the guitar comes in and it has the prominent melody and it doesn't move to the center. But again, it wasn't distracting. Attention grabbing, but not distracting. I think that's a couple. I'm pretty sure I'm going to say that a couple of times here because there are some really interesting things that are popping up throughout this track. Um, what's another thing I wanted to talk about on the production side, real quick? There was that one moment with the guitar panning where we would have the guitar hit on the left and then the right and then both and then the right and the left. That was interesting. I really enjoyed that because it brought a bit of a compositional aspect to the production itself. So that was really neat. So let's get into some of the musical things going on here. First of all, the drums, I really love their laid back idea. There aren't a lot of fills or big technical aspects to it. It really does sort of sit in the pocket and reminds me of sort of that, like I said, early 70s prog stuff where it just really sits in the groove and lays it down for everybody. Our bass is then allowed to play around with ideas and have some runs in it. And you guys know I'm a huge fan of the bass, and I love the bass prominence here, giving a bit of spotlight, and even when not given the spotlight, still having a moving idea rather than just sitting on, um, the home tone, the tonic, the root note of the chord. It actually gets to play around with stuff. I really appreciate that. Um, and then our guitar. I don't know that I have a lot to say about the guitar that it did unique. Much like the other two instruments, it just really fits into a strong role. It provides a foundational element when the vocals are in play, a little bit of a foundational element in the bridge in some of the sections where it builds atmosphere, and then the handful of times it gets the melody, it plays the melody. I really enjoy the guitar tone and the variety of guitar tones that are placed throughout here, and yeah, I mean, just like everything else, it's a real strong competence to it. And I don't know if I mentioned this, but the production is very well done for a band with 15 subscribers. It's kind of bonkers. Usually, when you think of a small time band like this, you're going to think of some rougher production, whether it's because they don't have the funds for a producer or they lack the experience to self-produce, which is I'm in both of those camps. Or just the fact that their recording equipment is not up to snuff to achieve that clarity that they might be aiming for. But no, everything about this song sounds very well produced. I would not guess it would be such a small group, which is, it could be well, it could be a mix. I mean, definitely there's some skill involved here in this group of crafting the sound the way it is. But maybe I'm just also thinking about the old bedroom style of bands that came out in like the late 90s, 2000s era when, hardware and software just wasn't as affordable as it is now. And maybe it is easier to make higher quality music with not as much experience. Again, not to diminish them. I have no idea. Maybe maybe somebody in the group has went to school for mixing or something, audio production. But it is just really well produced and kind of knocked my socks off a little bit. Hearing the song start that way. So we've kind of explored the sound of the song, the instruments in it, and how it was produced. What is the song doing? So it bounces through a couple of ideas. We have our verse, I'm going to assume, that explores a few ideas. I thought it was really cool how we had some variation through here, where we got our core idea, we had our vocal line over it, and then instead of going into a chorus, I think, we entered into a variation of this verse. I remember the drums kicked it up. They were doing double time on the hi-hat, so if it was like quarter notes, it was now eighth notes. Playing twice as many though. A little bit more drive. I don't remember exactly what the guitars and bass were doing. Maybe they were doing the same thing, maybe they weren't, but it had a different feel to it. We had a different set of vocals on top of this. And then something else happened. There was another shift, and I just remember commenting on the variations through this section. It felt like it was constantly evolving in a forward direction before we hit our first major shift, which was the chorus, which is what I'm going to call it because we do bring it back at the end, our hook for the song. And this took the slow, laid back groove of the verse and flipped it over and went for a super groovy driving section that instead of having the instruments pushing the song forward with the vocals dragging, we sort of saw the inverse of this with the vocals really pulling everything with it. Our vocals kicked up into overdrive with these super fast rhythmic sections. The guitar and bass and drums all went along with it. I think everybody was pretty much on the same rhythmic pattern here. But it really did, at least to me, feel like because the vocals are prominent, they're pulling everything with them. The vocals are saying, we're going fast. If you're ready for it, or if you're not, let's go. I'm dragging you. You guys are coming with me. And it really feels like it's led by the vocals at this point. There's also something I probably should have talked about earlier in the production, but the vocals went from being center panned to split. We had a harmonization going on with left and right, nothing centered except the drums. Really interesting production again. And much like I've said a couple of times, not distracting, but ear-catching. It is very unusual to leave the middle so empty and to fill up the sides in modern music. This is something I've talked about a lot when we explore tracks from the 60s and 70s, in that a lot of the times when we look at music back then, we have hard pans or center. It's really not, we don't have this area of in between in a lot of the older stuff. And, if we look at some even older stuff, especially when we have checked out a few of the songs from the 60s that we have on the channel, there kind of isn't a center. There is just left and right. And it's really interesting to hear some of those ideas adapted into a modern production where there is the in-between and we do have a center versus the sides, but we have a section of the song that is predominantly carried by left and right sounds. The only thing really in the middle is the drums, and again, they're sort of behind me, and I have no idea how that effect is achieved, and it is fascinating. So yeah, this chorus is just really great, super groovy. I don't know what I looked like what kind of face I was putting on, but I remember moving to it a lot more so than the verse. Then we get into the bridge, and I enjoyed the bridge for what it was, but I'm not sure it really helped the song in its entirety. Maybe when we get into the lyrics, it'll make more sense within the context of the narrative, but it existed as, well, what a bridge should do, which is a contrast to our A and our B, our verse and our chorus. And it is very contrasty. It has new elements in it, it has reworked elements. We have guitar solos in here. Um, and it is a series of sections, which I found, a really great way to go about doing that. It's not just this is the bridge, now we're going back to the chorus. They took us on a little journey, and I really appreciate that. But some of the sections I feel just didn't have much flow between them, and I wish I could say, this section and this section specifically. But I don't quite remember every single thing now. I do remember our transition out of the bridge back into the chorus was very rough. And I think it was that last section of the bridge that really felt out of place to me narratively, the story that the music was telling. Um, I think it felt weird going into it, it felt weird coming out of it, and thinking about it retrospectively against everything else in the song, it feels a bit out of place. And I don't know exactly what it is. I'd have to go back and give it another listen, but yeah, everything else felt like a natural extension. We had the guitar solo section, just a really nice progression of some of the ideas we had heard before in new context or new ideas or things like that. And then that final section just felt a bit odd. And like I said, I don't remember what was odd about it. And then we had this really harsh transition into the chorus. Um, and coming back to the chorus is real neat. Again, we kind of take some of those slower elements, flip them on their head, get this full on drive through this chorus, and it takes us into our outro solo. And I've already given my thoughts on this. I quite enjoyed it. I love the melodic flow, everything about it. I could sit here and listen to that guitarist play these little solo ideas all day. One key aspect, which I don't think I got to touch on, was the emotive quality of it, in that there's a humanness to it. Not every pick, every note played had the same attack to it, or reverb, or length, or anything. Some actually felt like they were missed hits. They went to play the note, and maybe just a piece of the finger grazed the string and slightly muted it, and they just went with it. And it added an extra dynamic quality to the performance itself. And we have all these little ups and downs, higher volume, sharper attacks, softer attacks, quieter sections, and it just had this really nice dynamic human flow to it that I don't think we see too much in modern rock and metal, because it's all about, sitting at one dynamic level for the section. But we're not talking about modern rock and metal, we're talking about 70s prog, and we did see more playing like this back then, and I probably should comment about it more, because dynamic qualities in performance is something I'm super passionate about. It's one of the big differentiations between rock and metal and well, actually anything mainstream, honestly, modern mainstream, and older styles of playing. Whether you're looking at older pop from the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, or jazz or classical, it's not so much that you're playing the right note, it's that you're playing the right note with the correct style and the correct volume and the correct placement. There's so much more about it. And I just really love that emotive aspect out of this guitar playing. Um, so yeah, I think that's it for the music. Let's dive into the lyrics real quick and we'll wrap this up. Ray, countdown begins so slowly. You strap to the seat, the future looks bleak, you bathe in rouge. Your helmet hides your emotions from one's view. Fear, the engines ignite below you, vibrations commence, flames swallow the night. Fate lifting your vessel, the situation becomes unbearable. Alright, so we have the launch of the Sagittarius. Our album art was like an astronaut. So yeah, we have what seems to be a rocket launch. Ray, you've got your unearthly hour. pearl needle ascends, and you just cleared the tower. Up ahead, the vacuum, future looking bleak. Below, the past echoes make you sick and weak. Man, you gotta stay strong for this ride. Traveling at this speed, follow the tide. This flight is bereavement and solitude. In the end, you'll find yourself on the other side. Tears catch the sunlight and float away from you. You flip back to switch for the final burn. You leave the earth. Isolation's tendrils wrap you in. Interesting. Yeah, so I think it's because we have the two moments, right? So we have our opening, which is a bit more laid back, a bit more chill, and that is assuming Ray is the name of our narrator, not narrator, protagonist, because it's speaking to them. Our narrator is speaking to the protagonist in third person. So Ray seems to be our main character. They're strapped in alone in this rocket, and it's the dread and the anticipation and all of this tension there. And then as the rocket takes off, it's all of this power and speed, right? And that's our chorus. Then we go through all these complex emotions through our bridge, and we return back to our chorus, presumably because, you know, it takes a while for rockets to get places. I think it's interesting at the very end, though, it speaks about the isolation of it all, and that is right before our final guitar solo that is kind of isolated within itself. It's a chill, mellow, pensive guitar solo to take us out of it, and I think that works for somebody who is leaving the Earth alone in a spaceship. So, yeah, I'd say that a lot of these themes are represented in the music, and I really appreciate. I even mentioned how some of these elements showcase themselves in the music before we even dove into the lyrics. Before I even know what the song was about lyrically, the music was already telling me the story, and I had already dictated some of the aspects that were present there. So, yeah, fantastic job bringing this together. Those are my thoughts on Rogue Frequency's launch of the Sagittarius. Again, I have no idea how these guys only have 15 subscribers. Go ahead and show them some love, man. As usual, in the description box, I'm going to leave all sorts of links for everything Rogue Frequency related if you want to catch up on their stuff or figure out what else they've released or, whatever, right? Get in touch with them, listen to their stuff. Everything's going to be down there. None of my usual plugs or anything like that is completely related to our creator request, our honored guests on the channel. So leave your comments. The band might show up, so you're more than welcome to post anything you would like about the song. You can also comment on my analysis or reaction to it as usual. And yeah, so tomorrow we'll have our album request, and then I won't be back for a week. I'll see you guys on the flip side. Alright, until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.